Just like the saying, there's a calm before the storm. Two expert sniper shooters from the Ethiopia U.S. Army camp, Bob Lee Swagger and Donnie, successfully wrap up a mission but are suddenly pulled back when they spot larger hostile forces approaching. They try to take them out, but the enemy opens fire as well. They quickly report the situation to the command post. However, instead of sending help, the captain instructs them to pack up since they're operating illegally in the country. He believes Donnie and Swagger are highly trained and will find a way out. Unfortunately, the enemy chopper detects their position and Donnie is fatally shot. Dismayed, Swagger lands a destructive shot on the chopper, taking it down. 36 months later, Swagger is retired and living in exile with his dog. Meanwhile, in Langley, Virginia, he is being discussed by Colonel Isaac Johnson, Michael Sandor, and Jack Payne as the best marksman ever. Though he was left behind as expendable, a ghost report reveals he inflicted 70% casualties. Strangely, the agency assets who abandoned him and Donnie disappeared 2 weeks later, and Swagger retired a week after that. Maybe he wasn't so expendable after all. Johnson tracks Swagger down and introduces himself.
My name is Colonel Isaac Johnson.
He presents a proposal. There's going to be an attempt on the president's life in the next 2 weeks. The government has been compromised, so they can't go through the usual channels. During that time, the president is scheduled to appear in Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Washington. An anonymous intercept claims the shot will be taken from beyond a mile. Though Johnson doubts such a shot is possible, he needs Swagger to scout each location and explain how it could be done, so they can stop it. Swagger isn't interested, but Johnson reminds him of the oath he once took to defend the United States. Swagger remains unmoved, but Johnson appeals to his conscience before leaving, putting Swagger in deep thoughts. Moments later, Swagger catches up with him and discreetly snaps a photo of his license plate. Johnson hands him an envelope, now confident that Swagger is on board. The next day, Swagger takes a long-range shot at a can and hits it dead on. Proof that a shot from that distance is possible. Deciding to accept the job, he packs up his tools and flies to Washington, D.C., Blending in like any regular civilian, he scouts the presidential residence, noting the placement of cameras. He then travels to Baltimore and finally to Philadelphia, surveying each site. Later, he meets with Johnson and concludes that only Philadelphia offers a reasonable chance for success. The shot would need to be taken from beyond 1,800 yards, from one of 6 locations approximately 5 stories high. The shooter would wait until the president took the podium and began speaking. The shot would require a large-caliber handmade bullet. While Swagger is certain the shot is technically possible, he reveals that even the lightest uncorrected breeze could ruin it. The shooter would need visual indicators between the podium and the firing point. Finished with his report, Swagger turns to leave, but Johnson asks for a private word. He wants Swagger to act as the spotter, since he's one of the few who would recognize the signs of a setup. After a pause, Swagger smiles and walks off. On the day of the event in Philadelphia, the president arrives. Swagger and the team are in position, each at their designated posts, waiting for what comes next. Using binoculars, Swagger surveys the surroundings and is introduced to Officer Timmons.
It's an honor.
As the president steps up to the podium to deliver his speech, Swagger takes note of the wind. At the same moment, a hidden shooter prepares his rifle and takes aim at the president. Still scanning the area, Swagger spots the shooter and orders the team to take him out immediately. However, to his shock, Timmons turns on him and opens fire, just as the president is shot in the head, sending the crowd into chaos. Turns out it's a setup. Swagger is shot at again, but manages to escape by diving through a window and fleeing into the street. Jack is furious with Timmons for missing the shot, but Johnson orders the team to clear the room and instructs Timmons to chase down and eliminate Swagger. As the room is wiped clean, Swagger's rifle is brought in and planted at the scene, sealing the frame up. Seems poor Swagger had unknowingly told the actual conspirators exactly how to execute the assassination. On the run, he encounters Nick, an FBI agent, and quickly traps him, handcuffing him to the wall. Swagger reveals he didn't shoot the president and names Timmons as part of the setup before stealing Nick's car and fleeing. Timmons arrives moments later, frees Nick, and radios in for backup, identifying Swagger as suspect. He describes the car and its direction, while the police and FBI units are immediately rerouted. Choppers lock onto Swagger's vehicle, broadcasting the plate number to all units. Thinking fast, Swagger enters a car wash, removes his jacket during the wash cycle, and tears a hole into the car seat to access a hidden compartment. Meanwhile, Jack is certain Swagger won't survive long, especially since he's wounded, and Johnson agrees, convinced he'll soon be found unalive. Inside the car, Swagger uses a first aid kit to treat his wounds as best he can before speeding out of the car wash. He's quickly pursued by police cars and choppers. When he crashes into the back of a truck and finds himself surrounded, Swagger throws the car into reverse and plunges it into the river. The FBI fires at the vehicle, but it sinks. After confirming Swagger's absence in the car, FBI Director Howard orders a search down the river. Meanwhile, Swagger has managed to escape, clinging to the side of a passing barge. Bloodied and barely holding on, he reaches a bridge and hides from patrolling officers and aerial surveillance. He steals a truck and drives off. Later, at the FBI office, news of the assassination breaks, and Swagger is identified as the prime suspect. Timmons is hailed as the one who tried to stop him. Director Howard scolds Nick for getting overpowered, but Nick feels lucky to be alive. He shares what Swagger told him, but Agent Lewis dismisses it, blaming stress for Nick's confusion. That evening, Swagger arrives at a supermarket but sees news footage linking him to the scouting of locations before the assassination. Unable to enter with his face visible, he cuts the power from the back and approaches the saleswoman. Though hesitant due to the outage, she eventually agrees to help and retrieves the supplies he needs. Afterward, Swagger takes a pipe from the car engine and sneaks into the restroom. He then begins treating his wounds. Meanwhile, Nick receives a tip from the saleswoman and shares it with Lewis, but Lewis brushes it off. Disguising himself with face paint, Swagger hits the road again. Nick, now increasingly suspicious, replays the assassination footage and analyzes all the information he can gather. Early the next morning, Swagger arrives in Kentucky at the home of Sarah, Donnie's widow. She recognizes him instantly and he insists
I didn't shoot the president.
she already knows because it turns out the actual victim was the Ethiopian archbishop. Swagger is confused about the motive but puts it aside and begs for her help. Sarah is reluctant and tries to send him away, but he stops her from closing the door and swears his innocence. Noticing she's hiding a shotgun, he tells her to go ahead and use it if she really wants to, since he has nowhere else to go. After a tense pause, Sarah agrees to help and tells him to put the truck in the garage before her neighbors wake up. Inside, she starts to call 911 but can't bring herself to report him. When the emergency dispatcher calls back just as Swagger enters the house, she dismisses the call, blaming it on a neighbor's dog. Seeing how badly injured he is, Sarah doubts she can be of help since she's not a nurse, but Swagger walks her through what he needs. He gives her a list of supplies and warns her to buy them from different stores to avoid drawing attention. Back at the FBI office, Agent Allardyce is surprised to see Nick already there and realizes he never left.
You never left.
Everyone keeps telling me I'm crazy.
Nick confides in her about his suspicions, pointing out a long-distance target Swagger hit in a competition 2 years ago. Replaying the assassination footage, Nick questions how Swagger, with his skill and experience, could miss the president and hit the archbishop instead, especially given the wind and distance. It just doesn't add up to Nick. Allardyce urges him to let it go and get some rest, but Nick persists. He points out a flaw in Timmons' report, noting that a sniper would have been positioned in the center of the room, not at the window as Timmons claimed. When he asks to speak to Timmons, Allardyce shows him a news report. Apparently, Timmons was shot and eliminated by a supposed mugger the previous night. Nick suspects it's just loose ends being tied up, but Allardyce refuses to believe it. Meanwhile, Swagger instructs Sarah on how to help with his treatment after she gets all the supplies, though she grimaces at the severity of what she's being asked to do. Thankfully, she manages to carry it out while he's unconscious. Nick visits the location where the shooting occurred, hoping to make sense of it all. Sarah disposes of the bloodied supplies, while Swagger is haunted by nightmares of the frame up. At the chapel, Nick climbs into a hidden space and checks the floor. Using a tape measure, he notices a small, precise hole and tries to check further, but is suddenly stopped by the bell. Meanwhile, Johnson, growing anxious, orders his team to re-examine every detail of Swagger's life. Swagger regains consciousness and finds Sarah by his side. She breaks the news that his dog was eliminated, with authorities claiming Swagger shot it himself, knowing he wouldn't return. Swagger is heartbroken by this because he raised the dog from a pup. Sarah asks what he plans to do, and Swagger vows to recover and get revenge. Back at his desk, Nick enters an International Gun World chat room and asks about a weapon system that uses a tripod with a specific leg span. As he waits for a response, he notices a suspicious man making a phone call nearby, but shifts his focus when a link is shared showing a video of that exact weapon in use. Later, at Sarah's home, she changes Swagger's bandages. When he asks if she has a boyfriend and she says no, the air becomes heavy with tension, and she steps away to do something else. To lighten the atmosphere, he thanks her for saving his life. She warns that they'll never stop hunting him, but Swagger replies that he plans to give them someone else to chase. Swagger begins packing in the room and Sarah enters, holding Donnie's old shotgun, freshly cleaned and oiled. She gives it to Swagger, then curiously asks why he agreed to the job when they first approached him. He admits they pushed all the right buttons and his patriotism couldn't let him stay back. He asks for her help with a plan, and she agrees without hesitation. Feeling guilty, Swagger admits Donnie's demise was his fault since he should never have brought him into that life. Sarah is hurt by this and slaps him, saying Donnie loved what he did and knew the risks. It's not Swagger's burden to carry, and he agrees. He apologizes, and they share an emotional embrace. The next morning, Sarah drives to meet the FBI agent Swagger told her about,
Give him the vehicle ID number.
who turns out to be Nick. The goal is to use him to flush out Johnson by passing him the vehicle ID. It's a quick handoff, and she wears a disguise and adopts a fake accent. Swagger watches from afar, relieved to see her make it out safely, and then sees Nick emerge as well. Suddenly, 2 officers confront Swagger asking for ID. When one moves to pull off his cap, Swagger throws hot coffee in his face and fights them off before escaping. He ditches his jacket and hides under a hoodie. Back at the FBI office, Nick sneaks into a private room and searches for the vehicle ID. Later, he questions a Lourdes, who cautiously tells him she believes CNN received an edited version of the assassination footage before the FBI. Nick asks who gave it to them, and a Lourdes replies that the source is an unnamed agency that denied involvement, which is a confirmation of sorts. She hesitates to reveal more, warning Nick it could get him charged, but he presses, and she finally tells him that the ASAC's role comes with Delta clearance. Meanwhile, Johnson is alerted about the activity in the gun chat room, and sees a Delta clearance request from an FBI field office moments earlier. Putting the pieces together, he realizes that Nick is the only person who had contact with Swagger before he vanished, and works with the FBI. While walking across a bridge, Nick is on a call with a Lourdes discussing a suspicious company with ex-military connections but no official ties to the government. Before he can process it, he's ambushed and kidnapped, leaving his phone behind. He's later tortured and drugged, and the men stage the scene to make it appear as though Nick shot himself, intending to end his life. However, things take an unexpected turn when Swagger takes out the 3 attackers one after another and cuts Nick down from where he's been tied. Nick is upset about being used as bait, but Swagger believes it was the only way to flush the men out. Nick advises Swagger to get a good lawyer, while he'll get the Bureau to work out a deal to prove his innocence. But Swagger isn't interested. They killed his dog, after all. Nick warns him that he can't win a war against them, but Swagger holds him, telling him that the law will never catch or hold them. They'll be back in business in 2 years, while he'll be gone for good. There will be more assassinations, more silencing. Though he didn't start it, he plans to finish it. Realizing he has nowhere to go, Nick decides to help Swagger. Meanwhile, Johnson, Michael, and Jack receive reports confirming that Swagger is still alive. They also learn about Sarah and her location, and Johnson orders Jack to pay her a visit. In Athens, Tennessee, Nick and Swagger meet an old man known as the greatest gunsmith. Swagger asks if it's possible to fire a bullet from one rifle and make it match another weapon perfectly. The man seats them and begins explaining the method. He tells Nick to grab a book from the shelf, then takes his hand, reading his palm, which makes Nick uncomfortable. Opening to a specific page, the gunsmith explains how paper-wrapped bullets work. Swagger asks if he knows anyone alive capable of making a 2,200-yard shot. The man mentions hearing about a shooter named
Bob Lee Swagger,
though he's never met him. However, it's clear he doesn't believe it at all. He adds that whoever made such a shot is probably already dead, because that's how conspiracies work. Swagger asks if there's anyone else, and the gunsmith talks about a guy who has retired from shooting. He was a brutal eliminator and was wanted. He was eventually tracked down to an abandoned building, and an artillery strike brought the building down on him. Some say he crawled out, others said he passed, but the gunsmith never heard from again. Recalling a memory, Swagger realizes the man he's talking about is Michael, who's in a wheelchair. The gunsmith takes Swagger's hand and begins reading his palm. He warns Swagger that things aren't always what they seem, and Swagger asks for a name. Later, Nick calls a Lourdes and asks her to look up someone named Mikhailo Serbiak. Meanwhile, Johnson tells Michael that Swagger will likely try to track the shooter. Johnson plans to use bait to draw him out. When Michael asks what happens to the bait afterwards, Johnson can't tell. Lourdes' search reveals that Mikhailo Serbiak is actually Michael, and she tells Nick that he is currently in Virginia. That night, Johnson meets with Senator Charles, asking for clearance to land a transport plane without customs checks. The plane carries 24 men, weapons, and gear from their Ethiopian operation. The senator instructs Johnson to leave no loose ends. At home, Sarah hears a noise and shoots a man trying to ambush her, but unfortunately Jack appears from behind, disarms her, and demands Swagger's location. Meanwhile, Nick and Swagger arrive in Virginia. While scouting the yard, Swagger knows it's a trap. The next morning, they visit a hardware store and buy supplies separately. They then build weapons and prep gear. Swagger teaches Nick how to shoot. Back at Sarah's, Jack beats her and leaves her in her underwear, trying to force out information. Nick and Swagger sneak into the perimeter. Nick acts as spotter while Swagger places explosives and expertly takes out security. Swagger enters the house and confronts Michael, demanding Johnson's real name, who he works for, and why the Archbishop had to be eliminated. Michael explains Johnson has used many names and is ex-military. They came for him just like they came for Swagger, recruiting wounded men for one job, then discarding them. The Archbishop was taken out because he intended to reveal what happened in Africa. Michael tells Swagger nothing happens without government approval. The prisoners are tortured at Abu Ghraib, and only the underlings go to jail. Apparently, the villages were massacred so the land could be exploited. As armed men close in on the building, Michael reveals there's a mass grave beneath an oil pumping station at the Eritrean border. It turns out Swagger unknowingly covered the retreat of the contractors who did the job, which was his mission with Donnie, and he wasn't meant to survive it. Michael confesses the senator is behind Johnson and explains that it's a self-protecting system. If one betrays the group, the rest destroy him. Nick updates Swagger on the incoming men, and Michael admits he stalled him long enough for their arrival by telling the truth. Before taking his own life, Michael reveals they have Sarah. Nick radios Swagger, giving the positions of the enemy. Swagger prepares to act and tells Nick to head to the secondary hiding location. He manages to take down one shooter that enters the house and gives instructions to Nick on when to blow the bombs. On his count, Nick does this, and the men immediately open fire. Swagger begins exchanging fire while running from one point to another. At his command, Nick detonates more bombs, which take down several men, and Swagger uses the opportunity to reroute to Nick. A chopper approaches, making Swagger recall how Donnie was eliminated. He begins shooting, then tells Nick to head over to the barn. Nick runs off while Swagger provides cover, then joins him. He directs Nick to run to the tree line on his count and fires at the chopper. A shot triggers an explosion that engulfs the chopper in flames before it crashes, allowing Swagger to run across to meet Nick. Luckily, the chopper goes down and Swagger escapes with Nick. At the office, Howard is briefed about Nick's involvement in the shootout, leaving him in disbelief. Meanwhile, Senator Charles isn't happy with the turn of events. In Montana, Nick makes a call to the FBI about Swagger, and Howard answers while other agents trace the location. Howard tells Nick to bring Swagger in, but Nick doesn't know who to trust and hangs up. Luckily for them, the team narrows in on the location and begins moving. Nick then receives a call from Johnson, who tells him about Sarah. Swagger also has something for him and plays the recording of Michael. He agrees to exchange the recording for Sarah and requests the presence of Senator Charles. Johnson disagrees, but Swagger gives him two numbers, which are the last 3 digits of the longitude and latitude of the pipeline, before asking where they can meet. At the agreed location being the top of a snowy mountain, Jack, Sarah, Johnson, and the senator arrive in a helicopter. Sarah is held hostage by Jack. Another helicopter lands at a distance, and someone steps out. Believing it's Swagger, their sniper fires. Sarah is devastated by the shot, while the senator and Johnson are pleased. Their joy is short-lived when another shot takes out the sniper, and the person who was shot stands up. Another sniper attempts to eliminate him, but Swagger shoots him down as well. The figure turns out to be Nick, and Swagger also eliminates the spotter. Jack panics and holds his gun to Sarah's back, but is stunned when Swagger shoots his fingers. The next shot blows off his hand, leaving him groaning in pain on the floor. Meanwhile, Howard receives an envelope and immediately mobilizes his team after seeing Nick's name. Swagger approaches and instructs Nick to search Johnson and the senator. While Nick does, Sarah picks up a gun and furiously shoots Jack multiple times, ending his life. Swagger gently retrieves the gun from her and ensures she's okay, while Nick apprehends the pilot. Johnson insists Swagger should keep his end of the bargain, and Senator Charles offers him a job. Swagger confronts him about the sanction to wipe out an entire village, but Charles claims the pipeline brought stability to the region. The FBI arrives, and Swagger lights up the phone containing the recording. Nick is surprised since it proved Swagger's innocence, but Swagger says no one is truly innocent. Once it enters official hands, it would disappear, along with them. Done with everything, Senator Charles leaves in the helicopter, and Johnson smugly tells Swagger that his rifle, recovered at the site, is in FBI custody. He declares himself the winner, announcing Swagger as the loser in the game. Soon after, the FBI surrounds them, and Swagger is arrested. At the Department of Justice in Washington, Swagger is brought in, and Nick covertly passes him something during a handshake. Attorney General Russert gives Swagger the floor to speak in the presence of other directors. To prove his innocence, Swagger takes his rifle, loads a bullet, and points it at Nick. When he turns it to Johnson, the room erupts in panic, but the gun doesn't fire. Swagger uses the moment to prove the rifle couldn't have been used in the assassination because he had disabled all his weapons before scouting. Therefore, the clip can't fire. Johnson believes Swagger has nothing on him and starts to leave, but Nick presents Russert with photos of what happened in Africa, linking Johnson directly. Unfortunately, Russert explains Africa is outside their jurisdiction and they can't make an arrest. Feeling victorious, Johnson walks out of the room and Russert releases Swagger as a free man, explaining they can do nothing about the system even after finding out the truth. At home, Senator Charles and Johnson make mockery of the meeting, but their laughter soon turns to fear when a body drops from the ceiling. Johnson moves to investigate and is instantly shot down. Now extremely scared, Senator Charles and an agent crawl on the floor as cars outside explode. Moments later, Swagger enters and takes out the remaining men before turning on the gas. As he walks away, the house erupts in flames. He heads to a waiting car where Sarah sits, and they drive off together. Looks like he really saw it through, just like he promised. It's a wrap for this one. Keep watching for more. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.